So in the previous video, we set up the document template, and now we're going to start adding that grid and margins in the baseline grid. Now, grids are really important as you become more proficient and more professional in your work, because they really are the kind of the backbone of what we do and how we lay things out, content, images, and text within a document. We've only worked with grids in previous exercises in the sense using margins, but you'll notice that this document has a much more complicated grid pattern. These green lines are the grid. We still have the blue or the purple line as the margins, but that green line is the grid. Now this grid, you might notice, is kind of, I have these text boxes and these images and these caption boxes aligned to the grid. And what a grid is allowing us to do is create a structure and a way to align things to. We never want to, with basically anything in design, unless we're doing something very free-form and organic and free form. We really want to have a structure where we place objects, content onto. So we create this, that structure that allows for, one thing it allows for is repetition. So things like widths of columns, widths of text boxes are consistent. We can use them to align objects and keep that kind of structure that's going to keep it very tight and organized and ultimately look more professional and look just kind of better, air quotes, better. So we're going to do that in this next video, or in this video that we're doing right now. Now, we set up the document. There's no margins, there's no grid. So if I zoom in, just pressing the Control or Command plus, there's nothing there, right? I don't have anything. We didn't set it up with margins or anything. So in this video, we're going to do that. Now I have a set of instructions here that are quite lengthy. Just bear with me, and we'll get through it. But it's very important that we kind of understand this and we work with this, because it's going to create, like I said, that really tight structure that's going to allow us to, still be creative within, but within a certain kind of constraints. So we're going to set up our grid in the master pages. I think in previous videos I've shown you what a master page is, and we've done that, I think, in the adventure ad. But now we're really going to work a little bit more deeply with them. Now, master pages, they're obviously available in our Pages window. Again, if you don't have the Pages window, you should, because you should have your workspace set up as typography or however preset you have. If you don't, Pages is, where is it? There. Now, masters are, again, can be very, very tricky for some students, because it's just, we're not used to thinking in terms of masters. We're used to just thinking in terms of pages. Now, there's not many other applications that we use masters in consistently. So it's something that's kind of a bit new to InDesign, or if you're working with InDesign for the first time. Now, masters, again, we access them at the top of the panel window here, or and they're different than pages. If I zoom out, Control minus, you'll notice that there's just this single spread. Unlike when I go to my regular pages, I have all of the 6 pages there. Now, masters, I have just that one spread. Now, again, just so to remind you, masters are the master. Think of them as the terrible or the sweet patriarchal or person or thing that controls everything. So anything that is in the master is going to be on the page that we have associated with that. When we have something on the master, it is not clickable, it is locked, and therefore not clickable on the actual page itself. So anything that happens to the master, I move this around, change this color, anything I do is going to be automatically updated on the regular page. So we need to use the master very carefully. This is not somewhere we put things that necessarily just go on one page. It is not something that we kind of take lightly. This is the big kind of the big papa or the big mama of everything that we're doing. So we need to be careful of what we put on our master, because ultimately it's going to show up on every page that we have associated with master. So you can see, for instance, I have master A here, and these are all A pages. If I had another master, and one called a B. And then I started adding pages there. There's a B master. There's nothing on that because there's nothing on the actual master. There's only something on the master A. So again, if I have, I'm just going to copy that and put that on the B master, change the color so you can see the difference. And so there's the A master and there's the B master. So masters, like I said, need to be, you need to pay attention to them, and we're only going to add absolutely the things that we need to add to them. So I'm just going to get rid of that one. I'm going to get rid of this dot, this big blob that we don't need. Now, what we're going to actually do on our master is set up our margins and our columns. So columns are a little bit different than we've done in the past. We've worked with margins in the past, that purple line. Columns are that grid pattern we see here. We see those blue lines, that are our columns, and I can kind of see them. You can see them. There is if I zoom way in, you can see this kind of square and then this kind of more narrow rectangle, and that is, we call this a column, and we call that kind of more narrow bit the gutter. So I have a lot of columns and a lot of gutters here, and then I have also this thing called baseline grid, and these are the lines that we actually are going to use to align the text to in something called align to baseline grid. So we're going to set that all up in our masters. So in our masters, not the regular pages. So just get rid of that for a second. So in our masters, not our regular pages. So do not have any of these pages selected. You want to have these selected. Now, the best way to select them, as opposed to just clicking on the individual pages up here in the master, is to actually click on the title master. And you'll see the difference here. If I just click on the individual page, I will actually just affect one of the pages. And I don't want to do that. I want to click on the title master, and that will affect both the pages. So I'm going to zoom out again and then just make sure I'm going to do this. So in layout and margins, so I'm going to have to toggle between this quite a bit just to make sure I'm doing it correctly. So in layout and margins, we're going to add a top margin of 33 points. Now, I know we're working in inches, so if you go over here, I can do a right click and I can see that we're working in inches, and when we set up the document, we set it up in inches. If you did not set up the document in inches, you can also do it here. So just do a right click and set up inches there. But in the master margin layout process, we're actually going to use points. Now, the reason we're using points is because points are the units that we use when we with typography, and so I want this to mimic typography. Now, it might be confusing, so just follow along and you'll be fine. It's just going to kind of, I'm not going to explain the whole math behind it, but I'm just going to do it, and it's going to set us up so we have some nice spacing for typography. So you can actually just copy all this. Make sure you've unlinked the chain. If you have this, well, I did not unlink it, so we'll have to do it again. So I'm going to now just put in the word point there, and you'll see as soon as I unselect that field, it will automatically convert it into inches. That is fine. I don't need to worry about it. I don't know what 46 point in inches is, so I'm just going to use the point measurement system here, and that will InDesign will automatically update that for me. And then when I press OK, I'm going to press OK, you'll just notice that, and go to our regular pages, that we have some margins here now. Now, if I zoom in, I can go use the zoom tool. I have a bit of a wider margin here, say you can kind of see here, compared to here. So that, just delete all that. So this is our left margin. This is our right margin. This is our inside margin. And this is our top and our bottom. So we just did that. There's our top, our bottom, our inside, and our outside. So that's what it should look like. I pressed OK. Going to select all this so I know I've completed it. Now we're going to create some guides, some grids, and some columns, some rows and some columns. So we're going to go back into layout, and we're going to this time create guides, and we're going to create rows, 13 rows. So type in 13. We're going to have a gutter of 11 point. I'm just going to copy and paste that just to be super strict about it. We're going to have a columns of 10, and we're going to use that gutter 11 points again. And then we're going to fit guides to margins as opposed to the page. So we started off with margins, so those are margins. So we're going to get these gutters and rows and columns to fit to that purple line as opposed to the page line. So I'm just going to check margins there, and then press OK. And then we automatically, you can kind of see if I zoom in, I'm pressing down on the Mac, actually Command and the space bar. On the PC, it is Control and space bar. And so if I just kind of zoom in using my cursor, just moving kind of in and out, you can see that is our column. These, this kind of space here is our column, that is our gutter. These are our, oh geez, what are they called again? Those are our rows and columns. And now this one, columns and rows. So this way is columns and this way is rows. You don't really need to know what it is, but columns this way, rows this way. And you have that kind of consistent 11-point gutter. Oh, they're actually still active, so don't want to do that. Don't want to make sure that they're clickable. We'll change that in a second. But you can see, I just want to show you that they're actually fit. This one is aligned to the margins as opposed to aligned to the top of the page. And then I want to create a baseline grid now. So I'm going to just select this, make sure we've completed that. So now we want to do that baseline grid. So again, that baseline grid is those gray lines, and that's what we're going to align the text to. So in InDesign, we actually have to do this using our preferences. So on the Mac, InDesign is, preferences are under InDesign, and on the PC, they're actually under File, Edit, Edit Preferences. So PC, they're under File, Mac, they're under InDesign. So it's going to actually be units and increments. And I'm sorry, not units and increments. If you accidentally did that, you can just go to grids, no problem. And this is going to be a little bit strange for us, but just bear with me again. So baseline grid. This is the baseline grid here. I want to change the color to, you'll see there's a drop-down menu here. I'm going to change it to light gray. Now the reason I'm doing that is because the light blue is going to conflict with the color of the margins and the columns here. The rows and the columns, and so I want to change it to a different color. And I want to make it something that's light so it's not overwhelming and doesn't distract too much. And I'm going to start it at 0. So that will be 0. Well, inches will be at actually the top of the page, but I want to make it relative to the top of the margins, just like we did for the rows and columns. And we're actually going to have these increments as 11 points. And this is going to coincide with our leading for the text that we're using. So this increments every, this is based upon what we've decided, or what you decide as your leading, so the space between lines. So if you have, say, I'll do this, I'll show you again over here. So if I turn on this, and you can see that I have leading is 11 points. So that 11-point increment is that is aligning to the baseline grid. So if you have if you decide to work with a different leading, then you need to, when you're in the preferences here, and then in grids, if you want to have your increments every, say, 12, 13, 14, 10 point, whatever, just change that after I go through this or right now. So again, 0, top of margin. And then I'm going to actually change the threshold. So the threshold is just how kind of light it is. I want to lighten it up a tiny bit so it's, again, not so overwhelming. And then I'm going to uncheck the grid and back. So if you have grid and backs checked, it means that when you have an image on your page, you're not going to be able to see the baseline grid because it's going to be in front of it. So I'm going to uncheck that so I can see the baseline grid no matter what I have placed on top of that. So we've done all this. And then when I press OK, you'll see, now actually I can't see it because I don't have it viewed. So on view, I go to extras and guides, and I show the baseline grid. Now, the next thing we really need to be aware of is kind of this view. So view, guides, and grids, we can see that we can show and hide baseline grids. There's also a, obviously a hotkey for that. On the Mac, it's Shift Command quotation mark. No, I'm always getting this wrong. So Alt Shift quote. Alt Shift quote. Yeah, Alt Shift quote. On the PC, it will be Option Command. No, Option Control quote. So on the PC, sorry, Mac, it's Option Command quote, and on the PC, it will Alt Control quote. So we have to be aware that there's these hotkeys. Now, I can keep them all on and just press W and they will all appear and reappear. But if I want to turn them individually on and off, you have to use the hotkeys or go into the view here. So hide the baseline grid, hide the guides is there, and that will obviously turn off the columns and the rows as well. And then oh, here we go, show the grid. So I'm going to say, just of ease, I'm going to keep everything on. So I'm going to press the Option Command quote and keep that baseline grid and just press, I'm going to mostly be toggling between the W. Also might every once in a while go Command Command semicolon to turn off the margins, and then Command Alt or Command Option Control Option, sorry, Option Command quote for the baseline grid, Command semicolon for the grid, and then just swap out Command and Option for Alt and Control on the PC. Or you can just kind of double toggle between W. Alternatively, there is this little button here at the bottom. You can go Preview and Normal as well if you really want to do that as well on the bottom of the tools. Oh, here we go. So you can do it that way as well. Last but not least, we need to lock everything. Now, it's important to lock everything because, like I showed you before, if anything is active, I don't want you accidentally moving any of the columns and grids and gutters. So we're just going to lock everything, and we're never going to unlock them. So I'm going to lock the guides, and then I'm also going to lock column grids. Make sure I have lock column grid selected. And then we actually want to also snap to guides. So that means that when we start placing objects in this, we're going to have everything kind of snap to those guides, as opposed to having the flexibility of kind of putting it wherever we want. It's going to make everything really, really tight and strong. So snap to guides, make sure that that is also selected. If you don't do that, oh, what did I do here? What did I do here? Oh, what did I do? Oh, shoot. I'm just going to Control Alt Z. Did I muck it up already? Oh, I just accidentally turned on Command semicolon or Command quote, and that turns on a grid. Now I haven't set up, this is a different type of grid, so I don't want to use that. Just so you're aware, last but not least for this video, if you don't have the snap to guides on and I start adding some things, you're just going to be able to put it anywhere, as opposed to if I have that snap to guides selected. Now when I start placing objects, it's going to, you can see, kind of snapping or aligning perfectly to those guides very, very easily.